Today I'm reading the next chapter of The Only Planet of Choice, Essential Briefing from Deep Space. I have done a prelude, foreword and chapters previous which finished with chapter 10, and this is now chapter 11. It's the second part of the book. It is received by Phyllis V Schlemmer, and it is a question and answers from mainly the 70s and 80s. It was published in 1993, and I'm reading them consecutively now. Chapter 11. The Altean Venture, Atlantis. Many of our ideas about Atlantis might be changed by the transmission that follows. As noted before, a few hundred years here and there does not make a lot of difference to the 9. All the dates are as they are appearing in the original transmission, and BC has been used where it was said. Within this chapter the terms Altima is used, as it was in the early transmissions. When asked about Altima by Andrew in the early 1970s, Tom had replied that it was the name of a unit working in cooperation with them. The term Altima later became Altea. Atlantis would seem to be deeply buried in our psyche, to such an extent that people become quite heated and emotional when discussing it. There have been more books written about it than most other subjects in the world, and with the approach of the millennium, no doubt the list will be added to. Among other things, perhaps Atlantis can provide us with clarification. Andrew, the next myths that we hear about are those about the Atlantean civilization. Did it exist, and how long did it last? We have a beginning, presumably, just after the Aksu period. Tom, we were waiting for when you would ask. I may explain, but briefly. Atlantis ended 11,000 years of your time, and it began 32,000 years ago. What is called Atlantis was a colony which developed and with which we made contact. When I say we, I do not mean the 9, but other civilizations. These civilizations translated technology. From their other colonies went out, taking the knowledge and technology with them. At that time, because of the gravitational pull, not all the technology was refined enough in order for it to be functional on this planet Earth. The time has come now when all this technology may be utilized. Andrew. Yes, what did they call it themselves? I'd like to get the true name. Tom. They were in truth Alteans. They were of the civilization of Altima. Andrew. Oh, they were Altemans. So that's why they are called Alteans, and this somehow became corrupted to Atlanteans. I see, thank you. John. Was this about the time of what we call the Flood? Tom. It was before. John. Was Atlantis in the area we would now talk of as the area around the Bermuda Triangle? Tom. It went from Greece to what you now call the United States. John. Oh, it was very large. Andrew. So there were multiple cities of this civilization? Tom. Yes, the Maya culture was one which was left over. It was a colony that lost contact and reverted. John. Now relating to that, there was a culture we called Mu, or Lemuria, in what we now call the Pacific Ocean. Was that before or after Atlantis? Tom. They were one and the same, as you had an Egyptian culture and one in Ur, which were one and the same. Andrew. Was that the principal means of transport that the Atlanteans used to get around the face of the planet? Did they just move around by sailboat and ship, or did they have aircraft? Tom. They had aircraft. They could also move in their bodies. Andrew. Of great interest to me is the relationship between the remnants of the Atlantean culture, the high culture, and the beginnings of the Egyptian. Tom interrupts. Egypt was a colony that was very, we will use the term, hardcore. Tom interrupts. Steve. So Atlantis was originally a Huvid colony, an extension of Aksu, and yet it became Altean in influence? Tom. Originally, in the seeding of planet Earth in Aksu, one colony went to what became Atlantis, and another was developed by Hoover. through Abraham in Ur and Canaan. Steve, there was a problem of dating the Atlantis period. The date of the end was, I gather, around 9000 BC. We have a beginning, presumably after the start of the Aksu period, 32,000 BC. Tom, that was not the beginning of the civilization of Atlantis. The civilization of Atlantis was a seeding, similar to the genetic seeding involving Huva, Aksu, and Abraham. The civilization of Atlantis was seeded by Altea over a period of time. It was in existence in phases for approximately 12 to 17,000 years, but not consistently. Guest. That is a very long time in human history. I wonder if there were any important phases in the development of Atlantis that are important to know about. Tom. The land of Atlantis was developed by Altea, one of the major civilizations of the 24, which was technologically advanced in many areas. Those of Altea upgraded again and merged with those who had already been genticized. As Atlantis expanded over an enormous landmass and colonized on far reaches of planet Earth, for they had the technological ability to do this, difficulties developed. This was because of planet Earth with its beauty, variety and sense of feeling, because of their love and their technological expansion, and because they were attempting to bring planet Earth to its true fulfillment of paradise. They became involved in the emotional feeling state of physicalness, and became very involved in the creation of larger and more prominent mating organs. They also attempted, through their scientific knowledge and understanding, to genetically exchange creatures with soul beings on planet Earth through transplanting. Do you know what we mean? Guess, no, not quite. Tom, you're a soul, are you not? So, if we then placed your head on a cow, would that not be an exchange of a soul for a non-human soul body? Guess, oh yes, I see. Tom, they were, because of their brilliance and knowledge, attempting to not merge with the thinking on planet Earth, but they thought that by creating these creatures, they could perhaps have the strength of the creature, or the creature could be serving them, or they could develop a means for more physical pleasure. And that was not the order of the day, as you would say. They also had realization that they had gone beyond the limits of their agreement. Andrew, what caused the disappearance of this Atlantean culture which spread from Greece across to America? Was it disease? Was it, Tom, it was brought about a great destruction. It was not Armageddon, it was not. It was spreading of the colonies and the weakening of the civilizations, and it was a natural phenomenon. Andrew, it was what we would call the decay of a culture. Tom, yes. And some of the remnants of that, I presume, were present in South America, North America, and so on. Tom, all over. John, this is a hypothetical question. If they had made better use of the resources, then the physical destruction of that culture might not have taken place. Is that so? Tom, you would like to believe that. What we are explaining to you is that the loss of it was due to a natural phenomenon. Your oceans, your earthquakes. Remember that you live on a physical planet. Do you understand? John, well, we understand that there are repetitions of tremendous upheavals on the physical planet, and I imagine that was one of them. Tom, but your religions of the world would like to relate these upheavals to the gods. Yes, says Andrew. They speak of the floods anyway. John, so 11,000 years ago, the religious story of the creation could be related to the flood of that period. Yes. Guess, are the teachings of the Kahuna in Hawaii a leftover of the Altean culture? Tom, they're a mixture, and they are of the tribe of Kohen. Guess, the Altean period lasted 12 to 17,000 years. When did the Alteans' unusual technological development become problematic? Tom, in the last of its 1,000 years. Guess, so before that time this was quite a healthy civilization? Tom, it was not stagnant. It also took in what it termed today the colony of Mu. Guess, and the colony of Mu, where did these people originate from? Tom, Ashan. Guess, centered in what we now know as the Pacific Ocean. Tom, that is correct. John, during this period I assume they had open contact with Altea? Tom, Availability of craft in the sky. All was lost. Humanness started again. Then out of that came Ionis. Yes, what did the culture of Mu begin? When did it begin? Tom, it was approximately the same time as Atlantis, after the settlement of Atlantis and the development of colonies in the tracks outwards. You know that the peoples of the Philippines are descendants of Mu, are those who live on islands in music skirts, and those who live on islands in music skirts. John, Polynesia. Guess Bali. Tom, yes. And guest asking, and they eventually joined forces with the people of Altea and merged with them? Tom, they were from Altea, originally seeded then by Ashan. Some of those in Atlantis were from Ashan. There were 3 seedings, yes? Andrew, did the hawk have anything to do with Atlantis? Tom, in what you would call 11,000 BC, there was a return, and the hawk and his people stayed all the time, and were different beings in the minds of the earth people. John, during this time, did the people of the Atlantean culture civilization have what we would regard as normal births, and go through a normal life cycle? Tom, no. Most cases of normal births are the beginning of lives where the person has come to learn. The births we are referring to were births of souls who came to serve. These are beings that know themselves and have a different intent within their core. When beings like this were recognized as founder or as God, as in the case of Horus in Egypt or Ea, Ionis in Ur, they were not birthed. Birth is for learning. When you are not birthed, you do not have the same emotions as physical beings. John, could you describe the function of the hawk and his group in Atlantis? Tom, they were teachers, but they also mingled with the physicals. Andrew, where were they centered on Earth at that time? Tom, the hawk lived in what you would call Crete. The other was in a different place, but they were in communication, as they had vehicles with which to communicate, because they were leaders. John, they were not considered gods then? Tom, yes, they were. Another leader was centered close to where you now have Florida and Bahamas. That is a part that is no longer there. And the one who has succeeded the hawk in Aksu, was a leader in a place off the coast of your South America. There are some islands there, but not islands of consequence. It was a very large landmass, and there were seas that lay between these lands. Andrew, what was the hawk known as in this Cretan period of 11,000 BC, and when did he leave? Tom, I cannot find the name in our being's brain, but it would be like Hieronymus. He did not leave. He continued until he became Holos in Egypt, after the end of the Altean cult civilization. Andrew, I see, and that culture, I take it, disappeared when the so-called Atlantean culture disappeared. Tom, it was swallowed. There are remnants and there are remains of peoples who have forgotten, but who in fact worship in the same way as before. Do you understand why it was swallowed? Andrew, no, we do not understand why. Tom, would you like to know? Andrew, yes, very much. Tom, as the leaders mingled, there were those who opposed. This is the old book. There were those who opposed that mingling. The hawk and other leaders felt that they were powerful enough, such that if they did mingle, they would overcome this opposition. But what they did not know was that those that opposed had more powerful desires. Then the 3 leaders came together, and from that period they were in a weeping state because of the great loss. Then they decided in conjunction with us to go and be the founders of Egypt. One of them went and founded Ur, and then later they came together again. Andrew, I see. The submergence or disappearance of the Atlantean culture spread out as it was. Was this an act of God, or was it? Tom, we were angry. Andrew, you were angry? Were you angry with the leaders for their role in mismanaging the situation? Tom, no, it was our ignorance and not understanding the density of the planet Earth. It was more despair really than anger. We are more compassionate now. Andrew, would you give us a small glimpse of the level of civilization attained by Atlanteans? Tom, You and the civilization into which you now live have achieved but a part of what the Atlanteans developed. Andrew: I see. So we are very primitive. What was their outstanding achievement, as far as you know, in Atlantean culture, civilization? Tom: in the field of medicine, of a far superior nature than your medicine. You're primitive in electronics, and they had all the knowledge of using the mind to move objects in themselves. If it had not been for that below their waist, they were always in trouble. If it had not been that below their waist, they were always in trouble. Then it would have been a fine civilization. Andrew: I see. And their medicine was not able to help them with that part of their problem. Tom: they enjoyed it. We have no objections to enjoyment. It is when it becomes all-consuming. And it became. Would you really like to know the truth? We know not whether those upon your planet may handle it. John: well, we can decide whether we would pass it on. Tom: rather than using of the knowledge of medicine, which they had, to improve their mentalities or their physicals, they used their knowledge to improve their sex organs. Andrew: I see. And are there many remnants of this species or breed on Earth? Or are they all, Tom: they became a being, but are no longer in existence as a being. John: one thing about China. The system of medicine that they have there, acupuncture, is that a system of medicine that came from the Atlantean time? Tom: it is primitive compared to the knowledge of Altima, but it is more advanced than the knowledge of America. In Atlantean medicine, it was possible to replace even the true heart and the true brain. However, in your medicine, you can, for example, replace an arm, except that it does not have a true heart in it, vital spark. At that time, all the vital organs could be replaced with no difficulty and without severe problems for the physical body. Also, the organs that were transplanted were far superior to those that they were replacing. Andrew: that's incredible. If they had all this ability, as you say, then they must have had a fairly long life. I mean, they could extend life considerably, couldn't they? Tom: that is, in effect, what their project was at that time. Andrew: what would be the life expectancy of somebody who had good medical care in the days of Altea? Tom: it would in truth go into a few thousand of your years. Andrew: and yet, with that long life, they did not somehow gain an overall wisdom. Tom: they were involved in transplanting. Andrew: oh yes, I see. Well, I guess all that knowledge can be regained someday. Tom: it is within the mind of the dolphin. The dolphin has the answer, yes. This we say to you. It is important for humankind to understand the devastation brought about in times past when Alteans existed upon planet Earth, and also why a great many people of that time have chosen to be in the form of a porpoise or a dolphin. And some now upon this planet are here to inform humankind that they chose that form, so that they cannot recreate those scientific experiences which had engendered the mythology that is known throughout humankind today. They have not eradicated their mating desires, do you understand? We do not wish it to be eradicated, but we wish it to be understood properly. At the time of the great anger and despair concerning what had been done in Atlantis, and concerning those that used the knowledge only for their own benefit, there were at that time colonies that were not of a destructive nature. Those in truth were not destroyed. But also, in the Atlantean culture, there were people that were not of destructive nature, of the majority, who were nevertheless in a particular area where the landmass was destroyed, taking with it many people. They understood the necessity for the act, however. There are some of those people who now exist on planet Earth who have chosen to be on this planet Earth, and they are of a species that have chosen to appear in a manner that does not conform to the physical of their previous existence. We were not sure that this choice of physical body would be of benefit to their future soul growth, but it was their wish, and in their intellect and understanding of their physical nature during their past experience, they felt that perhaps they could then be of service in a proper way. And so they now exist upon your planet in a different form than they had before. They are not acknowledged as a species of a human nature. Yet, let me tell you, they are more humane than any human on your planet. They are the species of dolphin. Andrew, I see. What about making contact with them? Tom, they are very sensitive to all conscious work, but they are also guardians of the sea, and many that oppose the transformation of planet Earth live in the seas also. They observe and guard, and they also, when necessary, monitor other civilizations of the universe that approach Earth with questionable intent, and they attempt, because of their great strength of mind, to remove them. They are guardians. They are in service in a similar way that many of you humans are in service, and while their language is difficult for you, it is much better for us. The communication that we have is more in their normal range. Andrew, so if we research the language of dolphins, we would move closer to learning your own manner of communication. Tom, yes, and do you understand that those that live as dolphins chose that form because they could not be tempted by the physical? Andrew, well, I think they are very clever and very intelligent to choose that form and way of life, because they have less problems and complications than any humans on Earth, and probably more joy in living, and as you say, they are in service. Tom, but it is difficult for them, because of their form and their thinking, to perform a true service without the link with humans. Andrew, well, perhaps we can provide that link? Tom, understanding the link between Atlantis, the dolphins, and humans will release the knowing within human of how they brought about their destruction in past times. Know this, at this current time, humans that had existed in the time of Altean have come back to exist in this time also. Some who lived the life of a dolphin have now returned in uprightness, without water. This will release that eternal knowledge and knowing. This is of great importance, for when that connection is made and the truth rings out, and understanding illuminates. Yes? Steve, in one communication we were given to believe that the end was a natural catalysm, and that it is foolish to attribute it to the gods. On another occasion we are given to understand that the end was a result of our anger, and was in retribution. I can't reconcile these two. Tom, the Council has said to relate it in this manner. The Altean culture was created by the Alteans for us. There was an error in the way it was created. Altean created difficulty for the souls in Atlantis in their experimentations, and also created difficulty with their knowledge in hydrogen technology. Had we intervened and done something to contain this danger, we could have saved the situation, but in our distress with Altean, we created the destruction. Do you understand this? Steve, was it then a natural catalysm? Are we saying that natural catalysm was the means? Tom, it was brought about by experimentation in hydrogen. It's not hydrogen within your oceans. Steve, I see. The experimentation was done by the Alteans. Is that correct? Tom, yes. Guest, you mentioned that the Atlanteans used hydrogen technology. Was this a weapon technology or something other technology which became harmful? Tom, you understand that means water? It was not for destruction of others, but it was not totally understood, and it was a dangerous means that they could have created a chain reaction, because all oceans and atmosphere and lands contain water. Guess, is this connected with what nowadays we call heavy water? Tom, yes. Guess, and were they seeking to generate energy, or? Tom, it was curiosity about elements on planet Earth, attempting to understand, being fearless without sense. There the porpoise are souls, and the big humpback whales that nursed their youth were citizens of Atlantis. Also, there are now returning many citizens of Atlantis and Mu for helping planet Earth at this time, to fulfill what it was created for, and to be in service. Many have memory. Those in the sea are those who were not sure that they would live in an upright position and not contaminate. Therefore, they knew that by choosing the sea they could do no harm, and they could enjoy mating joyfully. Guest, now there are some confusions about the end of Atlantis, because you said once that it ended by natural processes, which I assume are the risking of the ocean levels at the end of the Ice Age. But also, you have talked about your anger and the sudden... Tom, the end of the Ice Age came about because of our disturbance. You understand that if you are in anger, and you are from us, that your energy has power, and also that if you are not from us, your energy also has power? And as I have said, it was not so much anger as it was despair. It was a chain reaction. The Atlanteans caused storms on the planet that they did not understand. They created their own demise for interfering in the nature of evolutionary development. John, some of these problematic characteristics are reappearing now, both in terms of destruction of the planet and our tampering with genetic engineering. Tom, that is exactness, yes. Guess, was Altean himself present through the period of the Atlantean culture? Tom, that was not possible. He is the head of Altean. It was an exercise for those civilizations to understand what humanness had to endure. You understand? I say, understand too often? John, I'm wondering if we could have an exact date of the final submergence of Atlantis. And did this happen in a very short period of time? Or, Tom, it happened overnight. You must understand that when we speak of that time, we are distressed. You humans have no recollection, and we do. If there could be a thing that would disturb the Council of Nine, it is that. There were those that, you would say, came in sheep's clothing, but were wolves. It was our oversight. We perhaps underestimated the influence of those who would like our position, who were never in a position to have it, though. You understand? Guest. You have mentioned how at the end of Atlantis, people went to Egypt and to Ur, carrying with them much that they knew. I also wish to ask about other parts, including Central America, the Olmecs, Mayans and Aztecs, and also the ancient megalithic cultures of Northwest Europe, including Britain. That is correct, including those you identify as the Hellenes from Troy. The Hellenic people of Greece and the Mediterranean? Tom, that is correct. You know that in the dispersion and the traumaticness, when Atlantis had fallen, there were civilizations building in 8000 BC in Crete. There are those also in the regions of Middle Asia, in the arena that is Israel, Jordan, also in the region of the Saddam? Guessed. Iraq. Tom, yes. Guessed. What about Central Asia? Tom, also in portions of China, of India, in regions of Tibet. Guessed. And the Americas? Tom, they were colonized also from regions of Israel. Did you not have Phoenicians, and they merged with Aboriginals? Guessed. In the Americas? With regards to that, do you have any other information about ancient visitors to the Americas? Tom, it was colonized by the Phoenicians. Guest, I see. Could we just review the sequence of events in the history of Atlantis then? Tom, you are attempting to arrange a chronologicalness. It is not perhaps the most useful to bring out purpose. John, what you're saying here is that different civilization, when they have these seedings, they were bringing different qualities, appropriate and necessary for human beings, Tom, and for planet Earth. There cannot be derived a full picture, for portions of the mosaic would not be understood, yes? That was the end of chapter 11, and I realized last night that Crossroads, chapter 9, cut off, sudden, and I don't know why, and I remember where it was, so I'm rereading the last 2 pages of the chapter 9 entitled Crossroads. I have a feeling, in fact the question and answers was about the situation on planet Earth, you know, that we should keep it clean and so on. John, make it clean. John, I have a feeling that as long as there is greed on the planet, there will be need. And many conscious people seem not to understand this concept, and I feel very alone with this, and I wonder if my strong feelings about this are correct. Tom, you have brought forth a great understanding. What you speak of is important, but this is the understanding of a myth. We will explain in this way. It is important to be relieved of the problem of barter. It is important that the disadvantaged be in peace and harmony. There is a place for all humans within the matrix, regardless of their form or understanding. There needs to be warmth and love and order above all else. For if there is not order, then the mind is chaotic. And if there will be mechanical or electronic objects that relieve the burden of the individual, we have no objections to that. The difficulty is that when these things become the most important, when the appearance or the price is the most important, when the owning is the most important, and when growing bigger and bigger with more possessions, is the most important. When it is thought that presentation of possession means success, that is a shell that has insecurity, do you understand? Like a lobster. A lobster has firm flesh, and there are times when it is soft and not edible, mushy. We now speak of humankind which presents itself like a beautiful lobster, but it's mushy inside. It is bitter to taste, not edible, and it can actually poison you. John, yes, that I understand very well. Now, the expression that Jesus used, that it is harder for a rich man to enter in the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, turns out to be true. Although there is no harm in wealth itself, it's harmful by virtue of the way almost all people inevitably treat it. Tom, that's correct. You have complete understanding. Another understanding is this. Business is a way you can give. Do you understand that? John, okay, yes, thank you. Business is a way you can give. Do you understand that? John, okay, yes, thank you. There's one question that concerns me about poverty. Why is it that great suffering that we've seen has been amongst people who are already suffering? I'm speaking of the starvation that exists in 1985 in Sudan and Ethiopia, and the floods in Bangladesh. It seems to me that these things are hitting poor and humble people who are the least to deserve it. I do not understand that process. Tom, those who speak of the laws of karma would say it is their karma. We wish to express to you that this is not so. It is the karma of the world that has created this. It is a situation, as the Nazarene said, of the moneylenders in the temple. It is a situation of greed, of political motivation. All of that brings down the floodwaters, which wash the floods away in Bangladesh. In this case, those that are suffering do not deserve that suffering. It's the world's karmic situation. Those who turn their head, those who believe the suffering is necessary for elimination of population, in order for the planet to have a more definite place, those who are callous, we would not wish to be in their situation in a future time. As with the 6 million Jews who brought forth the nation of Israel, these souls are also sacrificing to attempt to alleviate the earth to the position that it should be in. A planet of love that has attained complete balance between the physical and the spiritual, the negative and the positive. John, it seems to me to be a strange lesson that greedy people and greedy nations have to learn it in a way that is once removed from them. It's harder to learn that way than if they learned it by direct experience for themselves. Tom, it is the people within each nation that must make the movement to bring change. A nation has a head of government according to its deserving. Therefore, it is important for the peoples within your world of sophistication to bring about those changes. There needs to be an arousal within those people to understand that they must take a hold and move in forwardness to stop their governments from doing what they have permitted them to do in the past. It is a time that people must now take control. So that was the end of a chapter called Crossroads, which I found was very relevant. The next chapter will be New Light on ancient Egypt, and my dog is sleeping here, and I have been lucky, and I hope you enjoyed that. Next one to come. Oh, today is the 25th of July 2020. I have a little fly buzzing around here.